You've selected a show from the Podcast Jukebox, a DIY podcast network.
It's Will Shawn Podcast. The internet cried out for two more blowhards, and they courageously answered that call. Armed with the weapon of wit, each week they're joined by guests to discuss movies, television, pop culture, and anything else that's pissing them off. Take it away, boys.
I'm Will Link.
And I'm Sean David.
And this is Will Shawn Podcast.
The countdown begins. How you doing, Will?
Well, I'm so excited for this self-indulgent episode
It's been a long time coming.
I did not even think of how the rest of my life is. So I'm not even prepared to answer this question.
Good. You know what? Maybe that's for the best.
Maybe we should just start getting into it.
We got a busy day or busy hot hour here ahead of us. A little sweltering here in the Podcast Studio South.
But let me ask you, before we do get into it, what's going on in the world of Will Shawn Podcast?
The same. Want to thank all of our listeners. Please make sure you are subscribed to us on iTunes. Leave us a star rating and a comment if you can. If you are a fairly new listener and found us through other means, thank you for joining. This episode, as you will no doubt quickly realize, is a little different than what we normally do, so feel free to go back through our archives and listen to any of our previous episodes. They are all excellent, but none as excellent as this one will be.
Yeah, this will be the best episode we ever record.
Exactly.
And who is our sponsor this week?
2017. The world won't last much longer, so why not consider the past?
I feel like this answers a question that will come up in the Enemy, the podcast segment.
Now, I feel like the Enemy should arise, we should have discussed it beforehand, before we get to our top 5.
Oh.
It's a good idea, so just put that in there.
This is podcasting on the fly, folks.
Right here, you're seeing how the sausage is made. All
And
right, so
here it is.
Here it is. So why don't you tell them what we're doing today?
This week, we have decided in these dog days of summer to sit down and reflect on the past 17 or I guess 16 and a half years of this century so far and talk about the things me and Sean like to talk about the most, movies. We're going to be breaking down the 25 best films so far this century. It's something that we've seen some critics doing, and we said, fuck you, we're going to do it too.
We can do better than that. And so a few caveats to this. So we can only rate what we've seen. There have been a ton of films, and going through some of the lists that critics have put together, there are things that made a lot of lists that just we haven't seen. So, movies like Yee Yee or Autumn Sonata. Yes, I'm sure there's other... You could probably redo these entire lists with 25 movies that aren't even on here, but we can only rate what we've seen, so this is not definitive.
Yes.
As for myself, I don't know about Will, I tried to limit myself to one film per director.
I did not. I have... 2 directors have 2 films each on this.
Okay, Uli Bull is coming in strong.
There were movies that my love of them so outweighed some other films that I'm like, there was no way I couldn't put their other films on them.
And then, as far as my list went, I took into account rewatchability and influence that these movies actually had after the fact. So, for example, a movie like $1 Million Baby, which I can assure you appeared on neither of our lists,
Yes.
did appear on many critics' lists. That's a movie that exists in a vacuum. Yes, it's good. Yes, it won Academy Awards. It's turgid. It's depressing. I never want to watch it again, and I can't think of one movie that was influenced by it.
It's interesting that you say that. I feel like my list, rewatchability is a big factor for me.
Right.
But... which is funny when you get to some of the heavier titles that I have on this. But I think I put craft above influence.
Okay.
So I feel like a lot of films on my list, and maybe most of them, aren't things that necessarily... And who's to say, maybe 10 years from now we'll see that they did influence things, because we might be too close to it. But I wasn't really thinking about, will this influence the next... generation of films. I was thinking more about the craft behind these individual films. And I think what drives my list more than anything is emotion.
Okay.
Like, I think I tried to think of the movies that I emotionally reacted to the strongest.
Okay.
So, with that...
Yeah, and so with that, we just need to paraphrase President George W. Bush and, remind you that this process required hard choices.
This was some of the hardest choices I ever made.
All right, so who goes first? I think we should rock, paper, scissors it.
Are we going to do that on the podcast?
Let's go.
That's a
Rock, paper, scissors.
shoot. Oh.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Okay.
Paper covers rock.
Will, you go first. Number 25.
Number 25, and this is a pure, like, kind of emotional pick.
All right.
And it's also one of those picks that almost didn't make it, but I wouldn't be being true to myself because I saw this movie 5 times in the theater.
Oh, jeez.
And I also feel like whenever you make one of these lists, the last slot is something you should try to have a little fun with.
Okay.
So I went with Star Wars The Force Awakens.
Okay.
Because, again, I saw it 5 times in the theater, and from an emotional standpoint, we went into this century with Star Wars in a very emotionally confusing place.
Yeah.
With the prequels.
An emotionally confusing place. That's putting it lightly.
And
well, I mean, to be fair, the prequels did fall within our purview. I'm surprised there's no Revenge of the Sith on this list.
I didn't put Attack of the Clones.
I'll defend Attack of the Clones.
But this is a movie that kind of brought back my love of Star Wars. And I also think it's a very well-made movie. It's smartly done. I know people criticize it for being a rehash of the thing you already loved. But I feel like you had to do it this way to set up what I'm convinced will be a really terrific trilogy.
Okay.
I love it.
So, my caveat, before we go into number 25, I had one movie which I originally put on the list because it technically came out in 2000, but then I went back and Roger Ebert placed it on his best of 99 list, so I excised it. And that is Mike Leigh's Topsy-Turvy about Gilbert and Sullivan, starring Jim Broadbent. It's phenomenal. If you've never seen it, it's wonderful. And then my honorable mention, which I could not, in a good conscience, put on the list. You know what we're talking about. Alexander, the Ultimate Cut.
I half thought, and when I was joking with our mutual friend Lorenzo, he said, well, you know he's going to have Alexander.
No, here's why. Because the theatrical cut is a terrible movie. The Ultimate Cut, which never came out in theaters, I have to put it on there. I'm sorry. Honorable mention, Oliver Stone's Alexander, the Ultimate Cut. My real number 25 is only the greatest and most influential action film, Bourne Supremacy.
Oh.
The second Jason Bourne movie.
That is an influential action film because that ended up influencing Bond films.
Everything. And it's a fantastical, kinetic movie. I remember seeing that for the first time in the theater and just losing my mind. I've seen it multiple times since then. It's ultimately rewatchable, and it really did push action films into a brand new place.
Did you ever end up seeing the latest Bourne film?
Yeah, it was fine.
Okay.
It's like about the way Paul Greengrass just completely broke the mold on that movie, and and how influential, and also it's just a damn good spy film.
I will be talking about Greengrass later.
Oh, I see. This list. All right, number 24.
24. This is I think my most controversial pick.
Do it.
And this is a film that I'm willing to bet a few years from now would not make the list.
Okay.
And it's La La Land.
Okay.
And the thing is, I'm still close enough to it where I'm feeling moved by it, where I'm feeling the joy I felt from it. I think it's a movie that gets a bad rap because...
It's not about rap, it's about jazz.
Well, yeah. But that it's...
I mean, it's gooey and gooey.
But I think the ending in particular is quite beautiful. And what it's saying about having to make the choices between love and art, and as someone who, moved across the country to pursue a dream.
Yeah.
Like, I find that highly relatable. I think the musical numbers are a lot of fun. I wanted to put a musical on this, and I decided to put this.
As a native of Los Angelino, its vision of our freeway system is a waking nightmare from which I can never escape. Okay, my number 24. For all my Sakharov heads out there, Russian Ark.
Oh, okay.
So this movie, I know, many of you know what I'm talking about. Russian Ark was a documentary about Alexander Sakharov, a Russian film director, where he starts. The movie is one take, and it's legitimate. It's none of this bullshit. Row pushing on a back. It is a 90-minute steady cam take that goes into the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, which is one of the greatest art collections in the world. But it was also the Russian palace of the Russian czars. The Winter Palace of the Russian czars. And what this movie does is it starts going through the galleries, but then as it moves through rooms of this palace, all of a sudden now you're in 18th century Russia. And as he goes through it, you are weaving your way through the entirety of Russian history, the Russian Revolution. It kind of jumps back and forth. And the way the movie ends is with this massive choreographed, beautiful ball, which is a reproduction of the Tsar's Winter Ball in like 1912, which was basically the last great pre-World War I event of Russian aristocracy. It's a beautiful, stunning movie. It's emotionally powerful. And Sokurov has been very influential in the way he just tackled this. They spent months and months practicing this thing, and they got the movie on like the 9th take or something. But it uses hundreds and hundreds of extras and costumes, and so Russian Ark, phenomenal movie.
You know, I've never seen it.
It's a good watch.
But I've always heard about it because of the whole one-shot thing.
But beyond that,
incredible.
it's a movie that overcomes the gimmick. Okay.
Nice. So my number 23 is a good example of me wanting to put a specific director on this list.
Okay.
And it's my favorite film of his for this century. And it's Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris.
Okay.
What I love about this film, you know, we talk about on the podcast nostalgia a lot.
Yeah.
This film, and most of the time when we're talking about nostalgia, we're talking about something like Stranger Things,
right,
where it's like, it's a recreation of our nostalgia, or it's something like Transformers, and it's just preying upon our nostalgia. Midnight in Paris is a rare film that I feel is about the idea of nostalgia, not necessarily just presenting nostalgia. If that makes any sense.
No, exactly. And also, it's a nostalgia that none of us actually experience, but it's a nostalgia that we've read about. Okay, that's a good pick. I actually, that's... I had a Woody Allen movie on the list that I removed. It'll show up on my, when we kind of go through some of our discards. But this wasn't the one, but it came in close second.
Woody Allen's had, I think, some... people always say about Woody Allen, he's not as good as he used to be. In this century, he's made...
Cassandra's Dream.
Scoop.
Curse of the Jade Scorpion. I mean, the list goes on.
But he's also made Match Point and Vicky Cristina Barcelona and Blue Jasmine and Midnight in Paris, which I think is also, he's had this European phase. And the opening of Midnight in Paris makes you fall in love with Paris the same way the opening of Manhattan makes you fall in love with Manhattan. Right. And, it's also very funny, which helps. And I don't have as many comedies on here maybe as I should.
My number 23, keeping with my obsession with the 18th century, and what I will argue is the best Sofia Coppola movie of the current era, Marie Antoinette. And this is
a controversial pick.
So I love Lost in Translation. For me, Marie Antoinette does something fascinating by taking Sofia Coppola's general interest in displaced female emotion, privilege, living in a bubble, puts it in historical context, but still just turbocharges it. The thing that ultimately made this win out over Lost in Translation is the energy in the movie. That Marie Antoinette has a vibrancy to it that I feel Lost in Translation just doesn't. Lost in Translation operates in sort of a different mode, and if I have to decide which one I want to pop back in, it comes back to Marie Antoinette.
Well, Marie Antoinette has more of a spectacle angle
which
to
I
it,
love.
where what Lost in Translation is a much more low-key thing.
Exactly.
I was talking to somebody about Sofia Coppola, and we were saying she makes movies, and it was about The Beguiled.
Yeah.
And about the whole controversy of they don't don't deal with any race, and you don't want Sofia Coppola dealing with
you
race.
don't. Yeah.
And I think she knows that.
Yeah.
Sofia Coppola makes movies about privileged white girls.
Sofia Coppola knows where to take her shots. She's Sofia Coppola knows that she shouldn't be driving to the lane. She should be taking 3-pointers from the key.
And Marie Antoinette is I actually like the movie. I don't like it like you like it.
Yeah.
And I don't dislike it like I feel most people do. But I feel like it never quite... I love everything she was trying to say because Marie Antoinette is the ultimate privileged white girl. But it never quite worked as well for me as it did for you. But you know what? I've only seen it all the way through once, and I feel like I should revisit it.
The third act is curious because she doesn't engage in the spectacle of the French Revolution. You don't get her being marched off and guillotined. It has a very subdued ending, which... I think works for the movie, but I think works against audience expectations. All right, number 22.
I have a very small film on this one, but one that
Can I guess
love.
what it is?
Yes.
Once.
No, not that. No.
Not that small.
Well, I think it's equally small.
Okay.
But one that I was very much moved by, Fish Tank.
Okay.
Which is the Andrea Arnold film.
Starring Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender and this girl, Katie Jarvis. And it's basically and this girl was discovered. She was having a fight with her boyfriend at a train station.
Yeah.
They're like, this is...
Which is basically the character in the movie.
Yeah. And it is such this raw emotion of this lost young girl who doesn't know, who really doesn't know her place or where her life could go because she lives in these slums in England and everything. And she has a...
Well, you'll be vacationing. You're going to do the fish tank tour, right?
Yeah, I'm going to do the fish tank tour. And basically, it's about the relationship she has with her mother's boyfriend, which is both fatherly and then not so fatherly. I just remember walking out of this movie and finding just such a raw, emotional experience. I loved this character. I rooted for this. She's the kind of character you watch, and she's not like a good person.
Nah.
But you still find yourself rooting for her to get out of this, get out of here.
Andrew Arnold's next movie, American Honey, is something that I really enjoyed when I finally saw it. But I think if it's ever playing on the big screen around here, I definitely want to go see it on the big screen because it's a movie that's kind of stuck with me a bit, and I want to experience it not on my laptop screen.
American Honey is the perfect example of a movie that I feel like is almost more of an experience than like a movie. And Fish Tank... I do think
it's a 3-act structure.
Yeah, Fish Tank is more of a movie, but it's like you can see the seeds of American Honey in there. That she was either going to go more polished or more raw, and I'm glad she went more raw after this.
Okay, now my 22 is the exact opposite of Fish Tank, Spielberg's Minority Report.
I was wondering if you'd have a Spielberg, and I wasn't sure which of two I was possibly thinking about.
I ultimately went with Minority Report over AI or Lincoln. And I adore all those. Actually, War of the Worlds I thought about a lot, but Minority Report, you can quibble all you want about the third act. I think it holds up, and I think it fits with the movie. There has not been a movie that has been more influential and prescient in terms of how we live our life, the way that advertising and society just operates as this all-seeing eye. And the further we get from that movie, the more real that movie feels. It's one of the best Tom Cruise performances, I feel. It's got Colin Farrell, Samantha Morton. The visual look of that movie is also extremely influential, so almost on par with what the Bourne Supremacy did. And it's a movie I think about all the time, and I really, really adore. And the movie kind of moves from this grittiness, and then the end of the movie moves into this classic cinematic. There's like a formality to the last act of the movie, and I think one of the reasons people push against it is because the movie has this weird energy, and then Spielberg falls into that last third act.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think it's one of his best movies, and I absolutely love it.
The vision of the future is tremendous in that film. And the performance, you mentioned Samantha Morton, who's an actress I've always adored.
Yeah.
Who doesn't seem to get enough work, if you ask me.
No.
And
she's great in Harlots on Hulu.
Oh, see, I don't have
tearing it up on Harlots.
I loved her in America, and I thought she was great in the role as a precog in that as well. It's a good Tom Cruise performance too. Who's an actor who doesn't get enough credit for the things that he's able to do well.
Exactly.
That's a great pick. I also have a sci-fi film.
Okay.
As this is for my number 21.
It can't be Event Horizon because that missed the cutoff.
Snowpiercer.
Nice. That did not. Okay. All right.
And I recently rewatched it, and it kind of firmed it up to be
Bong Joon-ho.
Whatever.
I can't get these Korean names.
I love, and it's interesting. It's also he's a Korean filmmaker, and it feels like one of the most international films I've ever seen.
Yes.
Both where the info. I mean, I believe it comes from a French comic. He wrote it with an American.
No Valerian, the City of 1,000 Planets.
And I mean, you have. It's like the most multicultural cast I can think of on this train, but it doesn't feel like. It doesn't feel gimmicky. Yeah, it just feels like, because this is a microcosm of what's left on the earth, and these are the people who'd be left on the earth. And, it's class struggle metaphor. It wears it on its sleeve, but does it in such interesting ways. Like, each train car they move into is like a class in set design.
Yes.
And Tilda Swinton is giving an insane performance.
She's not giving her best performance. We'll get to that later.
Oh, okay. But she's giving a great performance in this. And I think it's a great post-apocalyptic action film that I think is saying something really important.
Okay. Number 21, the best comic book movie, Spider-Man 2 by Sam Raimi.
Well, we'll disagree on
Now,
that.
here's why. Okay, so...
But I love the movie. I love the movie.
Okay, Spider-Man 2 does a couple of things that have not necessarily been surpassed. One, it's a classic, non-gritty, earnest, comic book movie. It's the first of these big-budget films that you can actually feel the fingerprints of the director all over. The scene where they're trying to remove the tentacles from Doc Ock, you feel like you're watching a Sam Raimi movie. Because he no longer had to set up the origin story and the exploration of the powers, all the stuff that was fun in Spider-Man 1, he was allowed to just kind of jump off and run with it. Additionally, the problem in Spider-Man 1 was that Willem Dafoe's, who was he, the Green Goblin?
Yeah.
He had that mask that covered the bottom part of his face, so you couldn't see them talking, and that was solved by Alfred Molina just giving an amazing performance. And the other comic book movie that I ended up discarding was the first Iron Man. So it was like a tie. It was a tie between this and the first Iron Man.
The first Iron Man is like kind of the one that started it all with Marvel.
But Spider-Man 2 is just a fantastic. It's a perfect comic book movie before they completely dominated our culture.
Were you considering Iron Man because of the influence factor? Because it was the first of those?
And it's entertaining as hell. And Robert Downey Jr. is just completely changed the way we thought about all these things.
Okay.
But Spider-Man 2 ultimately for me was the better movie.
I guess my quick question is it your favorite Marvel movie?
Iron Man 1?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Because it's not burdened with all the stuff that the Marvel movies now have, which is like you're just plugging into the latest chapter in an ongoing saga.
You know what? Spider-Man 2 was on TV the other night.
Yeah.
And I watched maybe about a half hour before I went to bed. And it's such a great film. And it feels like a comic book, which is nice. Like just the colors and the way it's looked, the way it's shot. Like it feels like a comic book.
Until we get to Ang Lee's The Hulk.
Well, I know what they were trying to do there, but that movie just does not work. But the thing with Spider-Man 2, watching it the other night, and I've just seen Homecoming, which I think is excellent. I think it's the second best Spider-Man movie.
Okay.
Homecoming.
Well, it's not exactly a deep bench to choose from.
I guess so. Even though there have been so many this century. But it's amazing how different it looks and feels now that I've gotten so used to these Marvel films. Right. It's really amazing how they kind of shifted in tone. My number 20, a Best Picture winner.
Oh, I don't have any of those on my list.
No Country for Old Men.
Okay.
Which is another one I recently rewatched in preparation of this. Like, and there are some I rewatched that I did not put on this list. I did a lot of rewatching recently.
Yeah. But Crash.
This is actually also an example of I wanted to get a director on there.
Yeah.
And I do think it's the Coen brothers' best film so far this century.
We'll discuss that later.
Although I think they've made some, honestly, Inside Llewyn Davis I love, and even the True Grit I think is actually really great and underappreciated. But No Country for Old Men, the concept behind it of this evil that will always be out there is such a powerful concept and so terrifyingly brilliantly brought to life by Javier Bardem in the movie.
See, I think that is a great performance of Javier Bardem. My problem with No Country for Old Men, and we'll get into this when I get to my pick later on, is that I think it's not a mode, and there's a problem because the year that movie came out,
Well, there are movies that came out that same year I have higher on my list.
But I feel like that mode of absolute evil is not their best gear. And we'll get into it later. But for that movie, I almost feel like, and I know this is controversial, I almost feel like that movie would have been better by a different director.
Really?
Yeah. Absent the Javier Bardem performance, which is a standout of the movie, everything else, I feel like they were just slavishly just trying to take Cormac McCarthy's words and translate it to the screen without adding everything else around Javier Bardem. I don't feel like they brought much more to it than is on the page.
You know, it's funny. The Coen Brothers often have a character that personifies like just evil.
Yeah.
The biker in Raising Arizona comes to mind as a quick example. I think also the Tommy Lee Jones, it's funny because the first time you see this movie, you're so taken with Bardem that you have to watch it more times to really feel these. And I think it's also a great Tommy Lee Jones
Here's
performance.
the problem. If you read the book, you can't help but just be like, oh, this is Tommy Lee Jones, like... That's what I'm saying. It's like the easiest decision, and he's just reciting the words from the book, and it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, but he still has to do the job.
He could do the job.
The Coen Brothers still have to do the job.
It's not their best movie.
I don't think it's their best movie.
Okay.
I think it's their best movie this century.
It's not. But moving on. The only documentary that made my list, and one that is just... It can't get out of my head. Werner Herzog's Grizzly Man.
Oh, that is a great pick.
Yes, so about the sad sack Timothy Treadwell, who would spend his summers living up in Alaska with the Bears until one year the Bears said, we're going to evict you. And they found his tapes. And Werner Herzog compiles all this, stitches it into a story, and then provides his inimitable commentary over the tapes insofar as he watches the footage of...
He listens.
He listens to the footage, of the audio of Treadwell actually getting killed by the Bears, but does not allow us to hear it, but comments upon it. Herzog, for a director that we love so much, has been really spotty in the last 20 years, but this movie is just like a documentary masterpiece because documentaries try to pretend that they're just capturing real life, but they're not. They're crafted narratives, and Herzog is able to show us that he is giving us documentary footage and letting us see things, but he's not hiding the fact that he's also crafting this into a story. If you haven't seen it, Grizzly Man you will not forget it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a great one. Number 19, Blue is the Warmest Color.
Okay, I was waiting for this to show up.
This is a movie that I loved when I saw it. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't, and this one we get into the thing of rewatchability because it's 3 hours.
Yeah.
And the movie is mostly shot in close up or mid shot.
Yeah,
like it's very claustrophobic in that way. I have watched this movie now 4 times in my life.
Jeez.
Yeah. And each time
it's your Alexander.
Well, except I would argue this movie was good from the start. I've watched this movie 4 times now. Granted, at least 2 of those times since seeing in the theater were showing it to people. I am always so moved by these performances and this portrait of a relationship. It's the kind of thing that it is so intimate. And I know it has the 9-minute sex scene that has been criticized, but I think that just adds to the intimacy. Like, we see every inch of these people. Like, we see Adele Exarchopoulos.
Yeah, you learned how to pronounce that.
Oh, who plays the lead. There are these close-ups of just like, she's messy. There's spaghetti all over her face.
I'm not saying a word. I can make so many jokes right now.
But it's like, you just feel so close to these people, and her heartbreak is your heartbreak. And I think this is, again, a good example of how emotion is leading my list. Like, even though I've never been in a lesbian relationship.
No, you have not. Although, to be fair, all straight men are lesbians at heart.
The relationship really spoke to me, and I loved it. And I think it's a beautifully shot film. I think the 2 lead performances, I know they all won a Cannes.
Yeah.
Very deserving.
And then never spoke to the director again.
Yeah, because the director's a nightmare. Yeah. But the results speak for itself.
He was not going to be happy until she had that spaghetti all over her face.
Yes.
Number 19, and the most recent film on the list, Jordan Peele's Get Out.
Okay.
I love this movie. He basically said, fuck you, took $4 million and crafted something that I think is going to go down as an absolute masterpiece of not just horror, but of social commentary. It's enjoyable as all hell. It's entertaining, fantastic performances. Just the scene alone with the keys, babe, the keys, like, That right there is just a classic scene.
And, like, we know it's not going to go well, and yet during that scene, we're still thinking maybe it'll go well.
This is a fantastic movie that I think is just going to age better as time goes on, and I also think, going back to the idea of influence, I think this is the beginning of a really interesting career from Jordan Peele, who managed to change. No one wanted to make this movie, and then he made the movie, and it made gajillion dollars. Everyone's like, oh, we want to be in your business, and he's like, no, now I'm going to choose what I want to do next. So I'm looking forward to what's coming up next.
Yeah, and he's doing more horror, right?
Well, social horror, which, you know what? Let him do whatever he wants, because he's clearly shown that he can handle it.
But as someone pointed out in another podcast I listened to this week about, like, Romero and Carpenter, they said a lot of things socially with their horror.
Right.
And he's, I think, got a bigger stage, a bigger platform.
And I think he's savvier,
like
and it's a different environment too.
Yeah,
So.
But you could see that those are influences over him as well, and it's a great film.
Yeah.
Here's my question to you about that: do you think come Oscar time that could sneak in there?
I think it'll get a best if they run a good campaign. I think it'll get a nomination. He'll definitely get a writer nomination, I think.
Then he'll lose to Camille Nanjiani
and Emily Gordon.
Yeah, in
for Big
screenplay. Because I think they're going to win screenplay.
I think so too.
Number 18, I guess, could be a horror movie of sorts. It certainly fucked with my head.
Okay.
Even though it's not a horror movie. Dogtooth.
Okay, one of your favorites.
Dogtooth.
Directed by
Yorgos Lanthimos.
I think you spent most of your time just learning how to pronounce all these foreigners' names.
Look, well, when I like their work, I'm like, I'm going to have to reference them a lot. Yeah. So let me learn their names. And by the way, these are Greek names I've had to do.
Oh, yeah, a lot of,
So I saw this movie at home. It's one of the few movies on this list, maybe the only movie on this list, that I didn't see the first time in the theater. And I've actually never seen in the theater.
Interesting. Okay.
And I watched it, and when it was over, it's one of those movies that when it ends, because it ends so upsettingly and frustratingly, I was by myself, but I said out loud, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
And I went to bed.
It's like the end of Holy Grail, first time I saw it.
I could not sleep.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I had a dream in which I rewatched the movie, and I remember the next morning emailing you.
Yeah.
And saying, I watched this movie last night, Dogtooth. Like, have you seen this? What the fuck? And you wrote back, I watched it last night too. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I rewatched it that very night because I could not shake it from my head. I'm not saying really anything about it.
Just, listen, you know what? You don't have to. Just go see Dogtooth.
It is a movie
by the director of The Lobster.
Yeah, it's a movie but it's also weirdly funny.
Yeah.
How the character, about these isolated characters, about how they start to learn about the real world a lot through movies.
Yeah.
They start like reenacting movie stuff, which is both very funny but very disturbing. Go see Dogtooth.
Number 18. You all gonna fight me on this, but you can go fuck yourself. One of the best comedies in the last 17 years is Talladega Nights, The Legend of Ricky Bobby.
This is shocking to me.
Okay,
I don't even think it's the best Will Ferrell movie.
Step Brothers, these movies are fine. I like Anchorman, I like Step Brothers.
Anchorman almost was my 25.
Talladega Nights, and this probably could have shown up a little bit lower, and we're getting to a little spot here. The next couple of films, I can just admit, maybe are a little bit higher than they should be. I probably could have swapped some of these out. I love this movie. I think it does the thing where it's the peak of this kind of nonsensical ensemble, half improv, half scripted, insane comedy that doesn't completely fly off the rails. I feel like Step Brothers and Anchorman, there's just a little too much made-up goofiness, where Talladega Nights still has a tight 3-act structure. It's funny as fuck, and it's a movie that is locking in with an element of like mid-2000s American culture, NASCAR, that adds so much to it. It's also beautifully shot. And it's visually fun.
I own it. I love it.
Yeah,
but
I love Talladega Nights. Anchorman is like...
I would argue Anchorman has the same 3-act structure.
It's just, for me, I find this way, way funnier. When I come back to these movies and quotability, and Anchorman, I just didn't love as much, and maybe it was hyped too much for me, or I watched it with people that just loved it too much. And I found Step Brothers to be way too mean-spirited.
You know what? I think both Talladega Nights and Anchorman are a step above Step Brothers.
Right.
I think Step Brothers actually has some
Now
issues.
the other comedy, and I was back and forth, but I ultimately went Talladega Nights because going back to influence, Borat was the other comedy that I was thinking of putting into this spot.
I rewatched that within the last maybe 2 years. And it still is very funny and a very smart movie, but I do think it's also Borat's a movie that like you almost had to be there.
It's like a comet.
Yeah, you almost had to be there at the time. Number 17
Yes.
on my, and I think you're right. I think like between 20 and 11.
Yeah, we've all kind of had, there's a little shifting,
These are like, I feel like the top 10 gets more solid.
Yeah.
These, like, the movies I'm saying now could easily be interchanged as where they're on the list. But number 17 is a movie that was much higher when I did this list back in 2010.
Okay.
And it's Juno.
Juno?
Which is a movie that I'm still completely charmed by. I still think it's a great teen movie. I know people have often criticized it for being like too precious.
Yeah. No,
or
Precious is higher on my list.
it's not the way people talk, which I call bullshit. We all have in high school. I had weird slang for things. People develop this. It's also a movie, so all that's always going to be heightened. Also, it's always been criticized. She goes through this pregnancy so easily. No, she does not. She fights and alienates her friends. There are some hard scenes where she is breaking down in this movie, whether it be in her car or whether it be to Michael Cera in the film, to Paulie Bleeker. Yeah. I think it has a great soundtrack. It has
Great cast.
Great style. Jason Reitman, by the way, I rewatched Up in the Air also recently. Did not make this list, but it's a movie I really like. And there's
Labor Day.
There's a run though of Reitman films. I think his run of Thank You for Smoking,
Stripes,
Caddyshack. Thank You for Smoking,
Juno,
Juno,
Up in the Air,
and Young Adult are actually four great, very stylish films, and then he lost that style with Labor Day, and he hasn't quite gotten it back.
His next movie is going to be with Charlize again and Diablo Cody, so maybe he can recapture some of that.
That's what I'm hoping. Juno is a movie that I will forever be charmed by. I think, though, I've watched it so many times, I burned myself out on it a little bit, and that's why it's really dropped to 17 for me.
All right. My number 17, and I had to put him on the list. And I still think this is also one of the best war movies, Black Hawk Down.
That's a intense film.
That movie, go back, first of all, and look at who the cast is in that movie. Once again, this is one of those movies like Bourne Supremacy where Ridley Scott, the old pro, is reinventing what a war movie looks like, sounds like, feels like. It's an astonishing achievement. It's a phenomenal movie. That's all I got to say on that. Kingdom of Heaven did not make it because, once again, honorable mention, I prefer the director's cut, which was not released theatrically, so there's no Kingdom of Heaven.
I am just realizing how long an episode this is going to be.
Keep this going. That's why I just do Black Hawk Down quickly.
But there's no way we don't get into some of this. And here, my number 16 is one that I suspect is on your list at some point quite high. Amelie.
Quite high.
Which is another movie that, much like I just said about Juno, I feel I'm repeating myself. It is impossible not to be charmed by. It is so visually stunning.
Yeah.
The soundtrack. I mean, I hear that music still in my head.
The special effects, the technicality, the whimsy, the wit of it. Yeah.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet is another filmmaker who I feel like, I know he had a film recently.
Knickknacks?
No, since then, that never made it out here in America, and I haven't been able to see it. He is a magical filmmaker, and a lot of his films before that, like City of Lost Children, were very dark magical.
Delicatessen, yeah.
But this one, again, in the Audrey Tattoo performance, I'll stop because I know you're going to talk about it more later.
I don't have much more to say about it. It's coming high on my list, almost maybe too high. All right, my number 16. It's a movie that should have maybe been a little bit lower, but I adore this movie, Perfume, the Story of a Murderer by Tom Tykwer.
Okay.
Based on the novel by Tom Suskind, this is about a character, once again, 18th century Europe. He is born with no scent of his own, but has the ability to smell everything around him. And it's a story about this innocent born in the gutters of the French fish market who becomes obsessed with scent, becomes a master perfumier, and then seeks out on this quest to create the ultimate scent, leading him to a series of murders. It's got Dustin Hoffman, it's got Jeremy Irons, and it is Tom Tykwer, who did Run Lola Run, and later Cloud Atlas, which may show up on your list later. I'm not sure. I love this movie. It's beautifully done. It's madcap. It's an insane, insane movie. You watch it and go, I can't believe this movie was ever made. Just watch Perfume.
Number 15 on my list, Cloud Atlas.
There we go.
This is another one.
This almost made my cut.
Okay, I was going to say, this is a movie that would be on no one's top 10 of the century except maybe you.
Yeah.
And maybe our friend Melody. It's actually...
It would have been lower on my list, but it would have been there, yeah.
Again, it's one that I'm not being true to myself if it's not on there. You want to talk about ambition.
Yeah.
This is one of... And I've been itching to rewatch, and I haven't. And if I did, it probably would have been higher. Yeah. But... this is a movie you're dealing with 6 different storylines, intercutting, all taking place in different time periods. You're dealing with 4 filmmakers. You're dealing with a cast that is changing race and gender, and I know that bothers some people, but also I think that's part of this film, and it is, in no small part, like, it should be ignored that it is, 2 of the directors are transgender women.
Right.
And I think they are trying to say something very profound about soul and passing on to different bodies.
Yeah, and also the mutability of bodies, right?
Yes.
And how just what your body and your exterior appearance looks like doesn't dictate who you are.
Yeah, which is why you have Asians playing Hispanics. And
Tom Hanks playing Tom Hankses.
Tom Hanks playing Tom Hankses.
If you haven't seen Cloud Atlas, just sit down, open your mind to it. It's a beautiful movie.
I feel like this movie gets a bad rep. Do you think it's because there's a lot of hokum, there's a lot of spiritual hokum in it that people push back on?
Also because it's so ambitious and it's biting off so much and it barely pulls it off. It pulls it off by the skin of its teeth.
And I think, you know what, particularly with sci-fi, I'm very forgiving if you're shooting for the moon. And to me, this one hits. There are some sequences in this film. One, when... in the slave ship in like 1845 or whatever, where there's a character running across the mast intercut with the futuristic Blade Runner-esque bridge. Like, the cross-cutting in this film is amazing. The score is amazing, which I believe Tom Tykwer did the music.
He does the music
for
his own movies. Tom Tykwer is a maniac machine. He's wonderful.
This is a movie, I said, don't dismiss it. I know no critics like it, but
fuck them.
See it.
Number 15.
Yes, for you.
One of the most enjoyable, influential, jaw-dropping, best experiences I've ever had in the theater. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
It's a
great movie. I just can't, Ang Lee, who is astonishing for the way he just switches between genres. He brought, 1990s Chinese wire work martial arts films into America. No one in America had ever seen anything like this. It's a phenomenal film. It's very rewatchable. It's a beautiful movie. It probably could have, slipped a little lower, a little higher, but Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Number 14 for me is Memento.
Okay.
Which is a movie that you could argue this one also is on there with influence, because I think a lot of people tried to mimic Nolan's kind of puzzle box storytelling
without understanding what he was doing.
Yeah. And this is a movie that,
not perfect.
But I feel like the gimmick, quote unquote gimmick, is also what makes the movie work. It's more than a gimmick because the character keeps forgetting and you are always kind of a step behind or a step ahead because of the way the story is unfolding.
For me, I will always remember that movie as being one of the most true depictions of the San Fernando Valley on film I've ever seen.
Really?
Oh, I love it. It's just that's what the valley looks and feels like. Number 14. I had to pick one of this director's films to make the list, and this is the one, Ocean's 11.
Oh, this is your Soderbergh.
It's my Soderbergh movie. I went through. He had a lot of options, but can you think of a movie that is more star power, more just enjoyable, influential in the way that he thinks about heist movies and the language of that movie, the way they tease the heist and then you see the thing happening before it happens and then it happens.
It even influenced this week's Game of Thrones.
Yes, exactly. Ocean's 11, you can, I can make an argument for Ocean's 12 and Ocean's 13. They're not
What?
great. No, they're fun. Not for this list.
12 is no good.
I can argue that. We'll talk later. Ocean's 11, though, he's got a lot of really good movies, since 2000. But this is just like Ocean's 11 was my pick.
Ocean 11 is a lot of fun, and my issue with 12 is Ocean's 11, you feel like you're part of the gang.
Yeah.
Ocean's 12, you feel like you're just watching the party from the outside in.
I'm good with that. Takes me back to high school.
Number 13, another Best Picture winner.
Okay.
And it's the only time a Best Picture winner also was my favorite movie of the year.
All right.
And it's 12 Years a Slave.
I was waiting for this.
Which I love the work of Steve McQueen. And one thing I love that he does.
Bullet, The Great Escape.
I knew you were going to do that. As I was talking, I'm like, well, when is it going to say?
Just let me take a breath so he can squeeze it in.
I love how Steve McQueen is a filmmaker who forces you to watch and stay on the scene.
This is like Blue's Warmest Color. You're kind of coming from the same place.
It's a very similar thing. And this movie, I mean, the amount of still one shots or that he does in this film are remarkable. You do feel like you've lived a lifetime with this. Oh my God, why am I blanking on the slave's name?
Lilu Dallas Multipass. No?
Oh my God. Now I feel so terrible.
This is terrible. I'm not editing this out.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
that's on
I
you.
love this film so much.
When it comes to you can interject. Number 13. Collateral.
That's a great film. And
Love it.
I might even make an argument it's Michael Mann's best film.
So would I. And, people complain about the ending for a couple reasons. Going back to, I love this movie, the music, the style, but this was one of the first movies to really embrace digital cinematography. And I've lived in LA most of my life. I've never seen a movie that captures the look and feel of driving around Los Angeles at night like this movie does. It's so interesting. Once again, another fantastic Tom Cruise performance. Jamie Foxx is amazing in it.
Solomon Northam.
There you go.
Sorry.
Not Northrop Grumman?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we got that out of the way. Collateral, Michael Mann. I love Heat, but that didn't fall within the scope of this. And I will also fight for Miami Vice, even though it does not belong on this list. But Collateral is a phenomenal movie that you should all go watch.
That's also a great Tom Cruise performance.
Yes.
Like a legitimately not like... It was fun seeing him play a villain, too. And I wish he would take
You don't have
more
Vanilla
risk on
Sky on your list?
I hate Vanilla Sky.
I know, we all hate Vanilla. No one likes Vanilla Sky. Number 12.
Number 12 is something I don't know whether it's cheating or not.
Okay, I know what this is.
And I think it's also on yours.
Yeah.
Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair.
It is, and it's way higher on my list.
You and me have gotten to see the whole thing as one.
So we saw the New Beverly and the Whole Bloody Affair, which is Kill Bill 1 and 2 edited together. And what's interesting is that the only theatrical prints of it were the ones that were shown at the Cannes Film Festival, so they have the French subtitles on the bottom of the movie.
What's great about... Let's look at it as one film. First of all, I think part 2 is Tarantino's most emotional film in a lot of ways. Like, the relationship between the mother and daughter is in what she wants. And also how weirdly, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but how the way the Bill scene goes down when it ultimately does. There's like a legitimate conversation there, and David Carradine is giving this amazing performance. Like, there are reasons that you start to understand why all this has happened. That it's some of the most powerful stuff Tarantino's done from an emotional level. And part 1, the fight scene with the crazy 88.
It's one of the best things. I mean, it's one of the best things ever put to film. Like, period.
Yeah. And I remember when we saw The Whole Bloody Affair, everyone in that theater had seen the movies before. Yeah. And when the music starts, that bam, 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 and Lucy Liu's walking into the place, the House of Blue Leaves, everybody in the theater just like kind of sat up in their chair, and you get taken on a real violent, just pure, cool, cinematic ride.
I'm going to say a few more things here because it's going to come up higher on my list, so I don't want to rehash it. One major change in the Whole Bloody Affair is if you see them as separate movies, at the end of part 1, there's this little cutaway to Bill saying, does she know that her daughter's alive? And then the movie ends.
Yeah.
So that leaves you on a cliffhanger. You're like, oh shit, I can't wait for part 2. In the whole Bloody Affair, that scene is not in there. So when you watch it as one stitched together movie, when the daughter shows up at the end, it is a legitimate shock, and it actually throws the balance of the movie off in a completely different way and creates, I think, a different emotional experience.
I agree.
And I think that this movie is Quentin Tarantino doing everything he does well, which is synthesize every single film he's seen, but put it together into something new, fresh, and interesting without, and this is my criticism of later movies, he's not trying to rewrite history through the lens of a World War II movie or a Western. This was just like pure cinema, and
We'll get to that World War II movie.
well, so, I mean, just putting this out there is my only Tarantino movie on the list, and I'm not going to say too much about it more once we get to it. All right, for me, number 12, and I did not cheat on this, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, I cheated on this.
Yeah, so The Fellowship of the Ring, I could have gone with the whole Lord of the Rings cycle, but for me, Fellowship of the Ring really was the one that created this world for me and made me realize that this vision, this fantasy vision of these books that I loved and the possibilities of this world could exist, that this was doable. And I think that the first one with Sam and Frodo breaking off from the group and going off on their own is one of the most emotional endings of a movie. I choke up every time when they go off on their own and break off from the group. I think, you can make an argument for each movie, but for me, The Fellowship of the Ring is the one that really is, if that movie hadn't have worked, we wouldn't, there's no Game of Thrones, there's no, arguably The Two Towers and Return of the King wouldn't have been as good as they had been because they wouldn't have been willing to throw the money into perfecting them.
Let me ask you this: if you viewed it as one movie,
Which I have,
and I have too, I have with you. But if you viewed it as one movie, like I'm doing on this list, and putting the trilogy as one and cheating, would you put it higher?
I still love it because it
or like would it be like in your? Do you think it would crack the top 10?
Yeah, I think
is what
so.
I'm saying,
But
as
I
a whole?
decided to take just Fellowship of the Rings as like a standalone movie.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that
right.
later, and I'll tell you my favorite one of them. But I will say, me and Sean saw them all back to back at the Egyptian Theater, which was a great experience. And I've been itching to rewatch the movies again, but
That's a big
God
commitment.
knows I haven't had the time.
Well, you got to watch Blues of Warmest Color again first, so. And
What's
Cloud Atlas.
that? I've watched Cloud Atlas 5 times in my
You're an
life.
insane person. All right, number 11, buddy.
The greatest comic book movie ever made, The Dark Knight.
Not American Splendor?
No, I like American Splendor quite a bit.
Yeah, I thought about this, but yeah.
And it's my second Nolan one on the list.
Can't wait to talk about The Prestige.
It actually, Dark Knight, you could argue, changed the way the Oscars are done.
Yes.
Which it's still kind of crazy. Christopher Nolan has never gotten a directing nomination.
He will.
I think he will.
Yeah.
Very
For
soon.
Dunkirk.
But The Dark Knight, I think it is just not just a great I think the best superhero movies work if they're also a great version of another film. And The Dark Knight to me is just a great crime movie. I also would say that the stretch from when they
The party scene?
from when they arrest the Joker, from the truck chase where they arrest the Joker to when the Joker escapes and Rachel dies. Maybe it's about 25 minutes or so. I think it's an intense and exciting 25 minutes that I've ever seen on film. And in part, again, as a filmmaker, Nolan's use of practical effects, he's going to really flip a truck.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel that more, and we're going to get to this with some other films even more later, but you're going to feel that more than like a fucking Transformer throwing a truck. I think it's great. And the Heath Ledger performance is a instantly legendary, deservedly so performance.
I don't know why I didn't make this list. I have like these weird quibbles with it, and I wanted the hopeful vision of Spider-Man 2 a little bit more, but Dark Knight was, kind of left off, but it made my life kind of, my potentials.
And I think the end of the movie, the speech about Batman, is the perfect speech summing up Batman.
Yes. Number 11 for me, the movie that teaches you not to stare at horses, Michael Clayton.
No, it's good he stared at the horses.
Well, he escaped the exploding car. I don't know why this movie is as good as it is. Every performance, there's no wrong movies in this movie. Every performance is spot on, and it also is one of those movies that just feels like a throwback to... they always say they don't make them like this anymore.
It's a 70s film.
Yeah, but when they say they don't make them like this anymore, yeah, they do. Michael Clayton is just a complete masterpiece of directing, performance, cinematography, tone writing. And then the last shot of him in the car is just iconic. I could have put this a little lower, but, number 11, I love Michael Clayton. And Tilda Swinton is, Tom Wilkinson is giving... His performance in that movie is on par with Ned Beatty from Network.
Oh. Are you thinking Ned Beatty or are you thinking Peter Finch?
No, Ned Beatty, when he comes in, like the scene in the
his
boardroom.
Scene?
Yeah.
With the primal forces of nature, Mr. Bale.
But Michael Clayton is just a movie that I saw it like 2 or 3 times in the theater, and I absolutely adore this movie.
That also came out in 2007,
which
I think is one of our great years of all time for movies. There's
a couple movies from that year, though.
Yeah. I already mentioned No Country in Juno, and you got Michael Clayton. These were all nominated for Best Picture. Another film that feels like... And Michael Clayton feels like a 70s film. You can make some arguments about No Country for Old Men, maybe because it takes place in the early 80s. You can make arguments Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, another film that just feels like a... and certainly my number 10 film, There Will Be Blood.
I got that much higher. Why don't you talk about it? I'm going to talk about it later. So
yeah, I'll talk about it just a little bit because well, you know what? It's higher on your list, so I'll give you the brunt of it.
Okay.
But that's a movie, like every shot of that film, everything about that movie. It is also such a uniquely American film. It's made by a brilliant American filmmaker, and it's about, it's a Citizen Kane type story in a lot of ways. It's a rise and fall, and it's a complicated... Plainview is a complicated character because even though he's this... By the end, this monstrous person who's isolated himself, there are these glimpses of
Does he change into that over the course of the movie, or was he always that?
There's a shot. I just want to say the shot, and then we'll get back to it more later. But the argument I have that there was always a little bit more to him, that then he kind of changes into that, is right after he tells his son, "You're just a bastard in a basket." Yeah. We cut to a flashback, a wordless flashback, where you see him just playing with his son. Just him being a dad, him being a kid. And I feel it's this moment that we are reminded that there was a level of humanity, and maybe it wasn't much, but there was a level of humanity. He actually did love this person at one point. We'll talk about it more. What's your number 10?
One of your favorite movies of all time, The Tree of Life. I love
this. Is the only one I'm actively
This movie
against.
Is... You either love this movie, you hate it. For me, it was I love Terrence Malick. I love every crazy fucking thing he's done. This is a man that gives into his convictions. He is not fucking around. The Tree of Life is... I mean, you can read this as a religious text. I know you're going to roll your eyes at me. It's a gorgeous, beautiful meditation on life and death. It's not perfect, but it believes in everything it's doing, and it will suck you into the movie. I love this movie.
I find it endlessly dull and pretentious.
I know you do.
I would hang any frame of it on the wall, though. It's gorgeous to look at. Malick is so frustrating to me.
Where are my United Cups fans?
Because I just don't respond to his work. I find The Thin Red Line, which in theory should be one of his more palpable things, I find to be so the way characters, and in Tree of Life too, the way they meditate about life and the way they speak about life. It's supposed to be this deep understanding of it, but I find it completely empty.
See, I argue that you have to almost ignore, in a weird way, you almost have to ignore the voiceovers and just get swept up into the visuals and the rhythms of... It's almost like the words don't even matter.
Well, you know what's interesting? My favorite stuff of Tree of Life is the creation of the universe stuff. And I know he recently did some IMAX film that I thought about seeing because I thought it would be a lot of that, and I'd probably like that. Now, let me ask you a question about Malick. So Malick doesn't make a movie for God knows how long. Then he makes Thin Red Line and New World, but then he still doesn't make a movie
Really
for a while.
like the New World also, high on my list.
He does Tree of Life. And over the past few years, he's made a lot of stuff.
Well, he made Tree of Life, and he made To the Wonder.
To the Wonder.
Night of Cups.
Night of Cups.
And Song to Song.
And maybe that's not a lot of stuff.
It's more
but
than
for
he
him,
made for a long time. Well, maybe
why do you
Malick-
think this is?
Maybe he found people willing to finance his insanity. Maybe Malick just needs to eat. Maybe he's just been sitting on a lot of ideas.
Needs to eat. No one's paying him for these things.
I can make an argument. I think Night of Cups is a fascinating movie that I could discuss with anyone later. They're not all successful, but I think there is no one like Malick, and we're going to be sad when he's gone.
Number 9 for me,
Yeah.
United 93.
Okay.
Which I think is one of the most powerful films I've ever seen. Paul Greengrass. And this is where his background as a documentarian really comes into play, because he cast people who were really working the day at the military, in the air traffic control, and he recreates that day with them. And it feels like you're watching a documentary. It feels like you're watching.
I still have
reality.
never seen this movie.
Is that a
I
fact?
just can't. Like, it's. I don't know. Eventually, I'll get there.
And then he puts you in the cabin of that plane.
Don't need to be in the cabin of that plane.
I think you think that, but I think when you see it, you will be moved by it even more than you realize, and the artistry of it, I think. And it really does feel like something that is honoring the people from that day. He went around and he got permission. He wasn't going to make the film unless he got permission from every family, member of every family, person who died on that plane. You have to see this movie.
I'll get to it eventually.
I own it.
I know you do.
I
can watch it online. I click a button. I can get fucking United 93 right in my brain.
I also there's a really great Peter Travers review of it.
Yeah.
It's short, but it's really great. And it's all about like how people say it's not the right time for this, but it really is, and to see this movie because it came out in 2006.
It's not like Oliver Stone's World Trade Center.
Which came out the same year. And it was all about how this movie is really the best of us as humanity and stuff like that. And it's a very powerful film. It's a brilliantly made film, and you should see it.
Fine. Number 9, a fairy tale, a dark fairy tale, and one that is absolutely captivating, Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, that's a wonderful film.
I love this movie. Beautiful performances. Guillermo del Toro's Spanish language movie about the Spanish Civil War, about a young girl finding her way into. I think it's the best thing he's ever done because it has all the inventive, crazy ingenuity of his without the like overblown spectacle. I think sometimes he gets lost in the size of his own projects, and this was very stripped down. It has one of the most beautiful film scores, beautiful cinematography. This is something that maybe could have showed up lower, but the more I thought about it, the more it was just higher on my list.
And I also think it's his
most personal
best
film.
thing because it's personal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think his Hellboy movies are actually a lot of fun, but they're
big studio.
But exactly, they come from this machine. Have you ever seen?
It's like Pacific Rim. I haven't seen what's his name. The
Devil's Backbone.
I haven't seen it.
I think you would like that.
Yeah.
That comes. It's not as much of a fairy tale as Pan's Labyrinth, but it comes from a similar emotional place. I am very excited for The Shape of Water.
I haven't watched the trailer yet.
That trailer has me very excited, and if done right, it could be on par with Pan's Labyrinth.
I was disappointed by Crimson Peak, though, so...
Yeah, I'll always give Del Toro a shot because I feel like he's going to give me something beautifully visually, and I went to go see the Del Toro at the LACMA when they had all his stuff on display. Del Toro reminds me of also what I was saying about early Genet.
Yeah.
And if you want to push back, like early Gilliam.
Yeah.
And Del Toro is the one guy who's still able to conjure up that magic.
He seems to be able to navigate the system a little bit better. And the last thing I'll say is, have you ever seen The Spirit of the Beehive, a Spanish movie? It's a huge influence on Pan's Labyrinth. So it's just a beautiful movie about growing up and losing your innocence and war and violence and, you know, the places that we could take ourselves to, you know, to imaginatively escape from all of it. All right.
Number 8.
Number 8.
Me and You and Everyone We Know.
Okay.
Which this is a movie that is on this list, not because it has inspired so much great cinema since it.
You mean Dupree?
But it has inspired me.
Okay.
It's one of those, as someone who's like has tried to write screenplays and novels and
this
stuff.
is Miranda July.
This is Miranda July's first feature. And it's basically about people striving to connect with each other. There's a little bit about technology and how that influences that very early on. Technology before people were like on Facebook and stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's also a great John Hawkes performances. There's a beautiful scene that I think people always talk about when they talk about this film, where they're walking down the street, Miranda July and John Hawkes, and they kind of go through like their whole imagined relationship together. And it's one of those films that it's the kind of thing I want to write. I want to write things where people connect like this, or strive to connect and maybe fail. And it's about people who just want to be loved and find love. And I think it's quite beautiful, and it's also very funny. There's a whole thing back and forth forever, which I won't spoil, but it's a very funny bit in the film. I'm very sure. Do you like Miranda July's work?
I do. I like her movie. I like The Future. I saw You Mean Everyone We Know in the theaters. I loved it. Another great movie that showcases the beauties of Van Nuys, California.
It does.
Another great Valley movie. Those street signs.
I got a lot of those on here.
There's a lot of movies shot, you know, in my hood. I enjoy it, but I don't know. As you'll see, like the list here, they're all kind of like bigger movies, and I go for a little bit of the Baroque.
This is the smallest. Well.
Yeah.
This is arguably the smallest one. I wonder if as we get to the top of my list of my movies, get oh so cool kind of thing, which might be too like much, but we'll see.
My number 8, which is the best movie the Coen brothers have made.
Ever?
No, since the millennium.
Okay.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh.
I love A Simple Man.
It is more Coen brothery than
Inside Llewyn Davis, fantastic. But something about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is that perfect blend of their zaniness, their imagination, and them doing something that only they can do. And it's a movie that has a lot of heart to it, but is very hidden. Also, and I know this is like a super geeky thing, but this was the first movie to use post-production digital grading on the image, which is arguably the most important development in film imaging in the last 20 years, where after they, film the movie, they then go in with a computer and they change all the color levels to make the movie have this like sepia tone. The performances are perfect. I know when it came out, this movie was panned, but this is the Coen Brothers movie that I've loved. Like I said, I love Inside Llewyn Davis. I love I love True Grit. But this is the one that I adore this movie, and I think it's up there with The Big Lebowski and Fargo as some of the best things they've ever done.
I love Oh Brother, Where Art Thou. I would definitely say it's their best straight comedy of this century so far. I think I like, as far as the century goes, obviously No Country, and I think I like Llewyn Davis a little bit more for the kind of circular weirdness factor of it. But
when you got to sit down and be like, when you're like, I got to rewatch a Coen Brothers movie, which one are you willing to pop in? You ready for
from
another
this millennia?
Yeah.
Maybe Oh Brother more than some of the other ones. I mean, of all time, maybe Lebowski.
Yeah.
But Clooney's giving a great comedic performance in that film.
But Dapper Dan Man, Will. Dapper Dan Man.
Number 7. I'm realizing quite a few of these we saw together.
Yeah.
In one way or another. And number 7 is Zero Dark 30.
Okay.
As you know, I'm a big Catherine Bigelow fan. I have always been.
You're a fan of Lo?
I'm a fan of Lo. And I feel like when she kind of came back on the scene with Hurt Locker.
Not K-19 the Widowmaker?
Which, that movie has a great third act.
Oh, good. Okay. An hour and 40 minutes into my commitment.
Look, the first hour and 20 minutes of K-19, you might want to turn it off, but then the end,
when it makes widows?
The last hour is really good.
Okay.
But she made I think one of the great vampire films of all time with Near Dark. I think Point Break, Strange Days, these are terrific films. And when she did Hurt Locker, she kind of got into this new style, almost similar to like a Greengrass and like the handheld.
Yeah, but she's more.
Kinda,
Yeah, but I feel like she's a little bit more formally structured than Greengrass.
which is why I think I like her a little bit more.
Okay.
Because I think it's a blend. It's a blend of like it's not quite the docudrama, but you still feel like you're in a real, like you feel like you're in those offices in the CIA. You feel like you were sitting in there on these. I think also it is such an intense film. Whenever a filmmaker can take a sequence that we know what the ultimate outcome is going to be, and we're still like our heart is racing, which is what she does when we go to the Bin Laden compound in this film. Also, Jessica Chastain is giving, I think, an all-time great performance.
That character doesn't work for me because it just never. My biggest problem is that the movie never congeals around the central character because she's like this amalgamation of like real people, and I feel like she's just this person that's just kind of ghosting through this plot, almost like she's like the excuse to make the movie.
I think she is. I think she is so amazingly focused, and I think you get behind the focus of the character. And I think the last shot, when it kind of breaks, is kind of beautiful. Like you get like. She's been carrying what she wanted to do for about 10 years to take him down. I think it's a great procedural in a lot of ways, too. Like, the way the breakdown of how they get Bin Laden, I think is so well crafted.
I might have to rewatch it, so I don't know.
But you liked the film.
I liked it, but it didn't make my list, so.
Well, there you go. And I think Bigelow's going to bring all those things to Detroit. I'll tell you about it next week.
Sounds good. Number 7, the exact opposite of Zero Dark 30, is Paolo Sorrentino's The Great Beauty, which is the biggest, craziest Italian. This guy is the heir to Federico Fellini and, weirdly, Michelangelo Antonioni, filtered through Steven Spielberg. I adore this movie. It is big, it's bold, it's ballsy. It takes everything to 11, but it still tells a very human story about aging and creativity and love and desire. He's the vision behind the young pope, which we loved. But The Great Beauty is just, I saw this 3 times in the theater. I love this movie.
This is a movie I regret not seeing in the theater because I think I would have liked it even more than I did.
Yeah.
Because of the visuals.
Yeah. He has an ear for soundtrack. He has an eye for.
I love his use of music in this and in Youth and even on Young Pope.
Yeah.
I never saw that Sean Penn movie.
Neither did I actually, but I love The Great Beauty. Is just a fucking masterpiece.
Should we watch that Sean Penn movie? I have a feeling it's before he found his style.
Yeah, that's why I'm worried about watching it. Number 6.
Number 6 for me, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Okay. I know I'm cheating, but I feel like I can't choose. But if I have to choose,
The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug.
The Two Towers is my favorite.
Okay.
Because the Battle of Helm's Deep, I think, is, from just a cinematic standpoint, like the best thing in the trilogy.
I mean, it's no storming the Bin Laden compound, but...
Storming the Bin Laden compound's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, things would have been even better if they had Gandalf there.
Yeah, if he came swooping in when that Black Hawk went down on the wall.
I mean, we've talked about the Lord of the Rings, like you said, it changed me. The other thing I love about this, it's the one that introduces Gollum.
Yeah.
And Gollum was such an amazing and influential creation.
Yeah.
Upon cinema, the Andy Serkis performance. I mean, we still talk about maybe Andy Serkis will get nominated for that 8 movie.
I think he will eventually, because I think people are starting to figure out.
But we talked about, I remember in 2002 saying, can this get nominated? Because it was the first time you saw one of these CG characters, and you hadn't seen it all that much before.
Yeah.
First time you saw one, and it felt like there was life behind the eyes. There was something. There was a performance there.
And one thing about the Lord of the Rings movies is that a lot of movies that use a lot of CGI or special effects, they don't hold up. Lord of the Rings is up there with a movie like T2, where because of the perfect blend of practical and visual effects, it like the CGI really holds up really well. It's shocking. All right, number 6, The Social Network. This is so. A lot of people think Fincher's Zodiac is a better movie. We can talk.
No. We're not gonna.
Yeah.
We're not gonna talk about it later.
Yeah.
But maybe we should have.
Why?
No, because like this is one that I don't have on my list, and it kind of was hurting me that I don't have it on my list.
This movie is, it's like the Citizen Kane of the 21st century. It digs in. Mark Zuckerberg will go down as one of the most influential people in history. Facebook will go down as one of the most influential inventions in the history of mankind. And David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin just dug in and created this icy, frightening depiction of technology and where it takes us and where we're going. I know people love Zodiac because of the obsessive attention to detail, but this movie is all the more remarkable because Aaron Sorkin's influence was All the President's Men. How do you write a movie about recent history while still making it feel iconic? And this movie was written only a few years after the events depicted, and it's an amazing achievement. This movie is like pitch perfect.
And we talk about, we were talking before about There Will Be Blood and like was there humanity in that character stuff. The Mark Zuckerberg you see in the first scene of that movie is just Mark Zuckerberg you get in that movie. If anything, he was always a prick.
Yeah, and when Mark Zuckerberg,
the last shot of that film just proves it because he's still just obsessing, and it was still about this one thing, about this girl. And I don't know how much that is really true to life or just cinematic creation.
He was still dating the woman he's married to now is who he was dating in college.
But still, it doesn't matter because once it's a movie, it's all fiction, and it's perfect. I can
tell you right now that Mr. Zuckerberg is casting his eyes towards presidential aspirations, and this movie will sink any thoughts he has about the presidency.
Yeah.
This movie will haunt him for the rest of his life because it is so true to life.
Because I'm not going to pretend. I mean, I've watched Jesse Zuckerberg as... Jesse Eisenberg as Mark Zuckerberg more than I've probably watched footage of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Oh,
by the way, people, we're running long. Go fuck yourself. Just sit in for the
because we still got 10 more movies to talk about.
Well, I think there's some overlap. We've discussed some of these.
Okay, so I'm going to make this super fast. So, why are we doing this? Why the hell are we doing this? I'll tell you why. Because A.O. Scott came out of fucking nowhere in the New York Times. What?
And Manola.
Oh, and Manola, that's true. Yeah, okay, sorry. The New York Times came out of nowhere to put out their top 25 of the century. And a few months before that, there was a massive list. 100 films, cold. We talked to 100 film critics and cold 100 films, and blah, blah, blah. And one of their number one's going to be on my list soon, too. But the point is, we couldn't wait a few more years to do this later? Like, why are they doing this now? I don't know, but we, like fucking suckers, because they had a slow news day, we got suckered into it, and then because we're obsessive list-making people, we were like, well, we gotta get on board, we know about movies, so that's why you, fucking film critics of this week's Enemy of the Podcast, go fuck yourselves. Why did you do it? Why did you do this? Yeah, why are we doing this?
Why is 2017 the year it'll reflect, huh?
Yeah, because we're not going to get many more years.
Yeah. All right, who's next? You're up.
So speaking of a world where there are a few years left, or a world that we're soon to go to where we can't make lists. Number 5 is Mad Max, Fury Road.
I thought you were going to hit me with Children of Men.
No.
Okay.
But another post-apocalyptic thing. Mad Max Fury Road is already, I think, one of the greatest action films ever made. Okay. Maybe you referenced T2 before, and that's like the action movies of my youth and stuff. Mad Max is the only film that I think of in terms of that. Look, I'm a huge Mad Max fan. I think those movies are constructed beautifully like westerns.
Right.
Like the structure is very easy to figure out. This one, no different. Max always just kind of rolls into town and has to help some people.
But has a gimp mask on.
Yeah, in this one. There is, you want to talk about practical effects. There is no more visceral action scene that I've seen in like modern Hollywood filmmaking than the car chases in this film. The only thing that surpasses the opening car chase is the closing car chase.
Take that, Baby Driver.
Which somehow tops itself. I remember sitting during that opening chase and being like, there is no way you can top that. Why did they open with this chase? And then the last chase with the people on those poles, diving down the car. It is so well choreographed. So, like, it feels dangerous. And for a Hollywood movie to still feel dangerous, like a big budget film.
It had to be a biopic about the Allman Brothers.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a movie that didn't end up making my list, but was an honorable mention.
Yeah, it's just a great film, and it's one of those whenever it's on, even though I own the Blu-ray, if I see it on, I start watching and I stick with it.
Number 5 for me is actually the only animated film to make my list, and shockingly, it is not a Pixar movie.
What?
Spirited Away.
Okay, it's a Miyazaki.
I love this movie. I had Toy Story 3 on there for a while, I had Inside Out on there for a while, but no, and I could have probably sacrificed one of these movies for a Pixar, but Spirited Away by Miyazaki is, for me, one of the most perfect, because the Pixar movies are still operating within this realm of like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, good guys, bad guys, struggles, overcoming, gaining allies, finding something, discovering something about yourself and moving forward. Spirited Away operates on a totally different wavelength where it's just about growing up in life, and sometimes people are good and sometimes people are bad, and there's no real enemies, and the struggles are mainly within yourself, and you just kind of muddle through it, and sometimes you fuck up, and sometimes you improvise, and you come out of it, and you learn something, and you just kind of keep trying to move forward. And this movie, I knew nothing about Miyazaki when I saw this. I kind of stumbled into the theater. I'd never seen Princess Mononoke. I'd never seen My Neighbor Totoro. And this movie enchanted me also. I saw it multiple times in the theater. I love Spirited Away.
It is. I think it's his best work. My number 4.
Yes.
Inglourious Bastards, which is my favorite Tarantino film. Look, this is admittedly, the Tarantino stuff is admittedly also high up for a cool factor, but hey, that plays for me. I get behind the batshit crazy revisionist history because I think it's so ballsy to rewrite World War II and have this make it have this girl burn down this theater full of Nazis, a girl who you feel real. I talked about the emotion you feel for Uma Thurman in Kill Bill, and this is the second maybe most in a Tarantino film where I really feel something for a character, and I'm behind her revenge.
It also introduced us to Christoph Waltz. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. That performance is so... there's a run of supporting actor performances, 3 in a row, that I think are 3 of the best of all time, where all 3 on my list of Bardem, then Heath Ledger, and then Waltz, all won back to back to back. They're all playing phenomenal villains. The scene that opens the film is so tense, where he is talking to the French farmer, and he knows the French farmer's lying, and the French farmer knows that he knows he's lying. And Christoph Waltz knows that Hans Landa knows that he knows he's lying, and there's this family hiding under the floorboards, and you don't know how it's going to play out, but there's a sense of dread that it won't play out well. And that sense, every scene with Landa has that after. Later, there's a scene in just a restaurant.
That's the best scene in the movie, with the strudel. And you have to wait for the cream.
Where he has to wait for the cream. And you feel that, you keep wondering, does he know that it's Shoshana? Again, you don't know. And to this day, I don't know. I think he might know. Because he feels like the character knows everything. There was also that 30-minute sequence in that basement tavern that I feel, for different reasons, plays out the same way. That it's just the tension builds and builds and builds to the moment where Michael Fassbender, playing a film critic, fucks up, and he's fucked up, and you don't understand how he's fucked up, and there's like a sadness because all the Germans were having a good time, and I don't know, this movie, I think also, going into this movie, I thought it was going to be about these, dudes hanging out in World War II.
Nope.
No, and I love that. I love that it surprised me so much.
Right. Number 4, the movie that shook me to my core, that has fucked me up ever since, and is another movie that completely changed the direction of how movies are made, Requiem for a Dream. This movie is just Hall of Fame level. We rewatched it recently with Lorenzo, and it just reacquainted me with how upsetting and visually and formally inventive and emotionally engrossing and just upsetting this movie is. Darren Aronofsky will never top this. I don't care what he does. This movie just came out of a special place of a young filmmaker just saying, fuck you, I'm going to make my mark, and just going and just breaking everything. It brought that MTV sensibility and that music video language into mainstream filmmaking. These editing techniques, the way he envisioned how they got high, the use of music, cross-cutting. all of it is just there's also not one wrong note in the entire movie.
There are a few films that when I leave them that I just feel completely drained.
Yeah.
Like I just feel like completely exhausted.
Yeah.
The last act of that movie exhausts me in ways that it's... And also, let's talk about that Ellen Burstyn performance.
Yeah. I'm going to wear the red dress on television.
Number 3, yet another movie I saw with you in the theater.
Yeah.
Drive.
Okay.
I love this film. Again, I feel like a lot of my favorite films end up being movies that keep me really on edge. Mm-hmm. And again, what I love about Drive, well, also Drive is also this weird kind of superhero movie or dissection of a superhero movie in a way, because he's got his superhero uniform of that jacket, that scorpion jacket, but it's...
He's just a good man trying to do good.
Well, he's also like, he's very Travis Bickle-esque.
Yeah.
And Taxi Driver is one of my favorite films of all time. Like, he's basically decided he's going to save these people. He's going to do whatever he has to take to do this right thing. There's the song that plays in the movie, that real human being.
Your old ringtone.
My old ringtone. And a real hero. And that's really what the film is. Yeah. And I feel like the driver in that is trying to be a real human being. Yeah. But for whatever reason, from this background that we don't quite know or understand, he's never quite able to get there except through violence and through saving these people from this situation. Albert Brooks is a great menacing villain in it. The opening car chase is great because it's not because it's the fastest car chase or the most stylish car chase. He's a smart driver. He knows when to duck down a corner.
He's no baby driver.
In a way, I know Baby Driver gets a lot of credit. I would take this driver over that driver any day. The way he plays, the way he calmly just waits, the way it's all designed to queue up with the basketball game because he knows he could disappear in the crowd. He's just the smartest driver.
Right.
And Nicholas Winding Refn, I think, is just such an interesting, stylish filmmaker. This is his most palpable film, maybe?
It's, I got a special place in my heart for Neon Demon.
I do, too.
And, what the fuck was that one?
Only God Forgives.
Yeah, which is a fascinating nightmare. But this is, So my next 3 movies we've kind of discussed already, so, number 3, New Lines, Freddy vs. Jason.
Oh, yeah, it's the one that brought it all together.
So number 3 for me is Kill Bill, The Whole Bloody Affair, which we've talked about. I love this movie. It's my favorite Tarantino movie. It's a movie I return to over and over again because it has so many nooks and crannies to it. Because it constantly shifts gears, you feel like you're being taken on a tour of just cinema history. And I think this was Tarantino at his purest. Pulp Fiction is still his best movie.
I guess it's his best, but it's not my favorite.
Okay, but this is I love this movie, so, okay, number 3.
Number 2.
Number 2, sorry.
Mulholland Drive.
I had to cut this out,
Which topped that critics list. You know what? And I almost put it number 1, and then I checked myself, because I think it's just I'm in Lynch mode lately because of Twin Peaks, but Mulholland Drive was always going to be 1 or 2. This is an obviously endlessly weird film. I like Lynch's take on Hollywood in it.
Yeah.
You have an amazing Naomi Watts performance. This is kind of the movie that put her on the map.
Yeah.
And it is also a very tension-filled film where you don't know what turn it's going to take. You don't know what's going to be behind the dumpster at Winkies. You don't know. And it's also this weird fever dream right before you die, possibly, moment where we play with people's real desires and fantasies and the life we imagine. We're in this dream place. Naomi Watts is doing this almost hokey performance that's so big and broad.
Well, the scene where she gets picked up in the airport, where she gets the old couple that pick her up at the airport.
Now I'm in this dream place. Oh, thank you. And then you see the scene where she actually has to act.
Yeah.
And she is so brilliant an actress in that scene. And then when you see her true reality, that is, really she's playing multiple parts in this film. I love Mulholland Drive. I can't say enough good things.
The reason
about
why
it.
this ended up not making my list as much as I love this movie is I went back to the idea of influence, and I feel like this movie exists in this weird Lynchian vacuum where it's so weird, it's so intense, and it's so of its thing that no one knows what to do with it.
You know what I think is interesting? If you look at Lynch's career,
Well, he really didn't do much. I mean, this movie almost he did Inland Empire, which no one has seen, and then now he's like done Twin Peaks. It's like
Inland Empire is the only Lynch film I haven't seen, and I can't remember. I think I was like, oh, this is going to be a mess because I heard it was a mess, and it was 3 hours, and I just didn't. But now because I'm so deep into Twin Peaks again, but I feel like his whole career built to Mulholland Drive.
Right.
And everything else, like this new Twin Peaks, is very Mulholland Drive influenced. And I feel like Lost Highway, which is a movie that doesn't quite work, I feel like Mulholland Drive is where he got that style right.
I think if I had rewatched it recently, it may end up higher. So my number one movie is one we've already...
Oh, yeah, your number two.
Oh, my number two, I'm sorry. So this movie was my top movie of the first decade.
Oh!
Amelie.
Okay.
I don't know why
I thought it'd be number one.
No, Amelie is... It's this little souffle that I can't get out of my head, and I love it because it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's just in love with cinema, and it's in love with love, and it's in love with Audrey Tautou, and it's in love with Paris, and it's just a movie that anyone can watch, anyone can love. It doesn't create too many demands on you. You don't need to like lock into what it's doing. You don't need to start interrogating your philosophical self for it. It's just a perfect, beautiful movie.
It's also very funny.
It's a beautiful, perfect movie, and I haven't seen anything in a long time that's just given me that much just pure joy.
So this feels like this is a very emotional pick.
Yes.
A pick driven by emotion. Audrey Tautou, quick question about her. Have you seen her in many other things? And
she did a movie called Precious.
I've seen her in a few things.
She did this movie a few years after Amelie called Precious, which is a French romantic comedy, also starring Gal, what's his name? Elmad, who's a French-Israeli actor. And it's charming as all fuck. She basically plays a woman that hangs around the French Riviera, picking up on rich, wealthy men and just kind of being their courtesan. But she falls in love with through an accidental misidentification, thinks the bellhop is this wealthy playboy and falls in love with him, and then he's really not that person. Have you ever seen... sorry, not Precious. Priceless. Priceless. It's a delightful movie.
I've liked her in other films. I have very long engagement. I've liked her in Dirty Pretty Things. I've liked her in... But...
She never hit that Amelie level again.
And I realize every time I see her in something else, and maybe it's unfair, but I'm like... Oh, I never loved you. I loved Amelie.
Exactly. You didn't like her rooting around in the underground organ trade, or in the Da Vinci Code.
Da Vinci Code.
But yeah, Audrey Tautou, it's just a perfect film, and she's like in pure Audrey Hepburn mode in that movie.
My number one.
All right.
Moment of Truth. Yeah. Although I think you know what it is. And this is a very emotional pick because after seeing this movie, no film made me want to meet new people, fall in love, visit foreign lands. It just things that I didn't necessarily do.
Woody Allen's When in Rome.
Lost in Translation.
There you go.
I mean, there is that, like, again, a big theme in a lot of my picks are it really puts you there and puts you in a character's headspace, and you do feel that kind of jet-lagged headspace that Bill Murray is in throughout that film. I think it's a great, soulful Bill Murray performance. I think the idea of two people who are at these moments in their lives where they need each other and they need to have some sort of relationship, and in order to move on to what's next in their life, but they know they're never going to see each other again. I think that idea is beautiful. The idea of sometimes you meet these people, have that effect on you, and I think that's captured perfectly in this film. I never thought of going to Tokyo until I saw this film, and then
haven't gone.
I still haven't gone. But if I ever do, it'll be because of this film, probably. I'm just in love with this film. It's my favorite Sofia Coppola film. It was my number one when we did this a decade ago. Not a decade ago, but 7 years ago.
And it still stays there.
Stays.
Well, Will, I think you know what my number one movie is. The Darjeeling Limited. No, it's There Will Be Blood. And all this shit I said about it's accessible, all the things I said about Amelie, you cannot get over the fact that this movie is a towering achievement of cinema. I can't even begin to describe the effect this movie has, what it's grappling with. It's literature, it's art, it's performance, it's filmmaking. It is like a perfect movie. And that's also, in a weird way, why I discount No Country for Old Men so much.
Because it beat it?
Yes, and because it's like I have a chip on my shoulder, because I'm like, in 100 years, people will be like, oh yeah, No Country for Old Men. There Will Be Blood is just a masterpiece of, it's Daniel Day, everything about that movie is just perfect.
I actually rewatched it this past weekend.
Okay.
And, it should have won Best Picture, obviously. Although I think I think that was a very strong year, and I think people will always look back fondly on No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
I don't think it's they'll view it as a travesty, but There Will Be Blood, when the history of cinema is written, will be considered one of the all-time great films. The only reason it's not higher on my list is because there are films I emotionally connect to more, but from a pure filmmaking standing point, it is one of the greatest films ever made.
And maybe I was influenced by the circumstances by which we saw it, which was a Q&A special screening 6 weeks before it was released, and it was a Q&A with Paul Thomas Anderson and Daniel Day-Lewis, and to just see this movie, which is a fucking masterpiece, in this auditorium, in this environment, and no one had seen it, and when the movie was over, no one knew what to do. Do you remember, no one clapped, everyone was just silent, that you didn't even know how to process this movie, and then Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Thomas Anderson walk out on the screen. Okay.
We've seen 7 of these in the theater together.
Yeah.
In one way or another, I've noticed.
Can I quickly run through some of the movies that did not make the list?
Okay, quickly.
Jean-Luc Godard's Goodbye to Language.
Okay, nobody's upset about that.
Superbad.
Okay.
Traffic. Mulholland Drive, AI, Match Point, Master and Commander.
Is Match Point, I assume, your favorite Woody Allen? Yeah. I almost went with Match Point over Midnight in Paris, but I think I'm just a little more charmed by Midnight in Paris.
Match Point, Master and Commander, Lost in Translation, Errol Morris's The Fog of War, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Can I talk about that for a second? That was in my top 10 when we did this years ago. I recently watched it. I still love it, but I feel like its magic isn't. If there wasn't 26, it would be number 26. But I feel like its magic isn't holding me the way it did even 7 years ago for some reason. But I think it's a brilliant script and an amazing film.
Inside Out, Adaptation, The 25th Hour, Borat, Drive, Iron Man, Ida, the Polish film, Leviathan, a Russian movie.
Now you're just naming 100 other films.
Spotlight, Mad Max Fury Road, OJ Made in America, Napoleon Dynamite, and Under Her Skin. You're I don't know what even to do with this.
I'd like to point out none of us had a Scorsese film.
We did
and
not.
I thought about, and here's the thing.
Wolf of Wall Street showed up on a lot of lists.
I love Wolf of Wall Street. That might be that or The Aviator might be my favorite of his of the century. And I feel like I love Scorsese's work over the past. I think The Departed is great. But maybe I don't like his individual films more than some of the ones I had on my list. But, if you were to ask me who one of the great filmmakers of this century still is, I would in a heartbeat say Scorsese.
Yeah. And he's done great stuff. It's weird that neither one of us had any of his, I
thought you might put one on just to put one on.
Yeah, he didn't, make the cut, so sorry, Marty.
I had no Spielberg.
Okay.
And I thought for a while about Catch Me If You Can, but then I felt like I might.
For me, it was going to be either AI.
And I thought about Minority Report too. And I'm glad you like AI so much because I fucking love AI, and I think that's a misunderstood film. I mentioned my Eternal Sunshine thing. I have no Pixar on it, and I feel guilt about that.
I know.
I came very close to putting either WALL-E on.
WALL-E was also I talked about,
which I think is one of the great sci-fi films of all time, not just or Toy Story 3, because
I also had that. I was toying with that.
That movie just crushes me.
We didn't have any no Slumdog Millionaire, no, It's interesting what didn't make the list.
Slumdog Millionaire is a movie I very much like, but I like less each time I see it. I've seen it about 3 times now, and each time I've liked it a little less. I never dislike it.
Yeah.
But,
All right, I think the people have had an ass full of us at this point.
Okay.
Thank you for bearing with us as we do this list. I hope you enjoyed it. We're gonna tweet out our full list so you can discuss it with us. I'm sure we've left out some things.
I feel like my top 10, I feel solid about locking for a while. The rest, it's like, you could trade some spots.
Yeah, exactly.
Sean, where?
I don't know. At the Sean David is.
You follow me at The Real Will Link. Oh my God, I didn't say at.
Oh, well, they're gonna turn it off now.
The Real Will Link.
Next week.
Malachi
Tune in next week. What does he do, Will?
Stunts.
Good, stunts.
And he has a name that's hard for me to pronounce.
And this will be very fun next week.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us for this indulgent evening for what is this called? For the Will Sean podcast. I'm Sean David.
I'm Will Link.
And we're finished.
In the words of Daniel Plainview, we're finished.